The Gambia once in and Britain stretches a welcome hand. Could the Commonwealth be reinvigorated in the post-Brexit era? And how relevant is the group in the post-colonial order? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. The United Kingdom is on course to break away from the European Union, as we all know, so it's looking for economic and political opportunities elsewhere. Enter the Commonwealth, an organisation made up of former British colonies, one of the most diverse, created 87 years ago. The British government says it will try to revitalise the Commonwealth and increase trade with member states. Let's take a closer look then at the organisation. It was made up of 52 former British colonies and works to promote parliamentary democracy and cooperation. The combined population is around 2.4 billion and it includes both advanced economies and developing ones. Member states receive political and economic support and assistance with election monitoring. Rwanda was the most recent country to join the Commonwealth in 2009, despite its lack of historical ties to Britain. The Commonwealth commits its members to 16 core values, including democracy and gender equality. And it can suspend member states if they go against these principles. Fiji was the first country to be kicked out after a military coup in 2006. It was readmitted 8 years later after it held elections. Pakistan left in 1972 after the Commonwealth recognised an independent Bangladesh. It returned in 1989 but was suspended twice during the military rule of President Pervez Musharraf. It regained its membership after Musharraf lifted emergency rule, though. Nigeria was suspended in 1995 for executing 9 environmentalists, including a Nobel Peace Prize nominee. And Zimbabwe was expelled for the 2002 post-election violence. The country then formally withdrew its membership. South Africa withdrew in 1961 during the height of apartheid. It rejoined, though, 33 years later under President Nelson Mandela. Now, Gambia's new government wants to return to the Commonwealth after a 4-year absence. Gambia's previous government withdrew from the Commonwealth in 2013, but its new leader is promising to rebuild ties, a decision welcomed by the UK. Nicholas Huck has more.
It's an old British institution, one which the Gambian national cricket team wants to be a part of. The Commonwealth, a kind of club of former British colonies that enjoy a special relationship.
Actually, it's lovely to be in the Commonwealth because they are our colonizers and also been introduced into the games of cricket. So we love to be in the Commonwealth, really.
That was not a feeling shared by former President Yahya Jammeh. He removed Gambia from the Commonwealth in 2013, saying it is a neo-colonial institution which his country will never be a part of.
At its height, the British Empire controlled over a quarter of the world's population. Gambia was its prized possession. It was a foothold in an area of Africa surrounded by colonies belonging to European countries. It's looking to renew its ties with former colonies, including Gambia.
The United Kingdom is on a charm offensive led by its foreign secretary, who on a tour of Africa insisted on stopping off in the small West African nation.
Very, very excited to be here in Gambia for the first time in my life.
Shortly after Boris Johnson's visit, Gambia made its official request to rejoin the Commonwealth. Some ties have never gone away.
Well, we hope to continue to benefit from technical assistance from the Commonwealth in the field of education, in public service, in the civil service reforms, in the field of health, and of course the one thing that binds us together, one of the values that bind us together, one of them being adherence to the rule of law.
Gambia has a wish list for the future. It's looking, for instance, to recruit judges from member states in order to deal with a heavy backlog of court cases. But what does Britain have to gain by revisiting and reinvesting in some of its former colonies? 2.3 billion people live in the Commonwealth. It's a young and rapidly expanding market. Compare this to the European Union and its aging population. With the UK looking to exit Europe, it'll be seeking better trade agreements with Commonwealth countries. For Gambia, getting back into the Commonwealth provides an opportunity to improve its game, not only on the cricket pitch, but in the marketplace. Nicholas Hawk, Al Jazeera, Banjul.
Let's bring in our guests into the show. In London, we have Alex Vines, head of the Africa programme at Chatham House. In Oxford, Sophie Gallop, a teaching associate at the University of Birmingham. And also in London, Murtala Touray, a West Africa analyst who is previously with IHS Global Insight. Welcome to you all. If I could start with Sophie, what do you think? Is the Commonwealth about to be revitalised in the post-Brexit era?
I think it would be slightly disingenuous to assume that the Commonwealth is predicated solely on Britain. And I think it would also be slightly disingenuous to think just because Britain's kind of restarting its involvement in the Commonwealth, everything's suddenly going to change. For example, I don't think that Canada's suddenly going to kind of sever or temper its bilateral relationship with the USA just because Britain's come back in. But I think it is a good opportunity for it to have a look at what it's doing. You know, it has excellent programs looking at democracy, human rights, rule of law, and it's a really, really good opportunity now that there is this renewed interest to get those projects kind of really, really going and really making a change in countries like the Gambia.
But Sophie, if the UK is on a diplomatic push to try and revive interest in it, do you think that might not make any difference?
I think it will make some difference. I think it would be disingenuous to think that the UK is the sole kind of driving force behind it. You know, the Commonwealth is made up of a plethora of countries, all who have kind of varying economies, varying cultural backgrounds, and UK is a part of that. And you know, obviously, it's the pinpoint around it, but nonetheless, in of itself, Britain does not make the Commonwealth.
All right, Alex, Sophie makes a good point. This is quite a diverse group of countries in many ways, not least of which is the stage of development of economies. This was never an integration project, was it? This is never going to be anything along the lines of the EU, right, Alex?
No, not at all. I mean, originally it was created as a framework for Britain to manage decolonisation and end of empire. So it was very much a British project initially. But it's no longer that by any means, and it is now a diverse organisation, 52 countries, maybe 53 if Gambia does rejoin, and it's also now about countries that have nothing to do with the history of British colonialism. Your reporter talked about Rwanda, but Mozambique joined the Commonwealth, so has Cameroon, and we could well see next year in 2018 at the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit that's going to happen here in the UK, that Togo joins. Togo is a former French colony. So there is something to be said for the Commonwealth in that countries that have nothing to do with Britain's history want to join this organisation. So I think this is more about globalisation, diversity, and accessing different networks, which means the Commonwealth is alive. It's not necessarily very healthy at the moment. It does need to reform, but it is alive and people see value in it, which is why they're actually lining up, making applications to join it.
That is an excellent point, Murtala. What is the value that countries like Gambia see in the Commonwealth today?
I think the request by President Barrow that it wants Gambia to be readmitted into the Commonwealth. I think first of all, they want to dismantle the legacy of President Jammeh, given that President Jammeh unilaterally removed Gambia from the Commonwealth, so they want to return Gambia back. And it's also about bringing Gambia back from the cold, bringing Gambia back from isolationist policy. So it's the Gambia being recognized internationally, that they are back as a key player. And Gambia has also been benefiting in terms of scholarship from the Commonwealth. And as the reporter mentioned from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lawyer Dabo, that Gambia seeks technical assistance from Commonwealth in terms of the Commonwealth providing Chief Justice for the Gambia. So I think there is a lot here to be gained from Gambia being a member of the Commonwealth.
Well, beyond Sophie, prestige and scholarships, is there anything tangible that being a member of the Commonwealth in today's world really stands for or means?
I mean, there are a number of projects within the Commonwealth. So we talked about the assistance with judges, for example, but they also have individuals who come and oversee the elections to make sure that they are being conducted freely and fairly. I think a lot of it really is intangible. It's Gambia saying, we know, we've lived through this traumatic past where there have been numerous violations of human rights standards and our democracy has been undermined. And now, under Adama Barrow, we are moving on, and we are showing this by rejoining the Commonwealth, which has these high standards, and it demands these high standards for human rights and democracy. And we're also withdrawing our withdrawal of the ICC. So yes, there are tangible benefits, but I think a lot of the intangible benefits kind of outweigh those signals to the international community that the Gambia is changing.
Well, you mentioned a whole bunch of points which we want to take to pieces in a second. Before I go to Alex, though, I want to go back to Murtala and say, we've referenced countries which have rejoined. What sort of benefits have their countries, their economies, enjoyed since rejoining the Commonwealth?
With West African countries, I think many countries, it's more of some kind of a tokenism in terms of benefit. I think it's more of the prestige that you are in an international club. And from my perspective, most of these countries, I think they've left some of the bigger countries within the Commonwealth to dictate the agenda, like countries like Australia, Britain. I think now that Britain is leaving Europe, I think this is a point of vulnerability, if I may say, and then these countries can take advantage to detect some of the terms within the Commonwealth, and to see that they gain more from being a member of the Commonwealth rather than just being there and enjoying the prestige and going to a gala and all these great meetings. I think they stand to gain more if they put more pressure.
Alex, I can see you want to get in there. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, many of the 53, 52 members of the Commonwealth are small states or small island states. And so one of the real advantages that they have, and especially one like Gambia rejoining, is the issues that those smaller states feel. And that's to do with blue economy, it's to do with climate change. I mean, take the example of Gambia. Climate change is resulting in rising sea levels, and there is a scenario that Banjul, the capital of the Gambia, could become Atlantis. It will go underwater within the next 40, 50 years if climate change isn't mitigated. That's a strong incentive for the Gambia to be involved in the Commonwealth. And it was one of the things that actually the former president, Yahya Jammeh, understood. The reason he pulled out of the Commonwealth was on the democracy, human rights issues, because Gambia was on a collision course to being suspended, maybe expelled from the Commonwealth because of the degrading human rights situation.
But Alex, hang on, let me jump in here and play devil's advocate for a second. Wouldn't countries with those sorts of problems be able to lobby bilaterally, whether or not they're a member of the Commonwealth, on the sort of issues you're talking about?
Well, yeah, I think the advantage is you have so many members who are small island states and, for example, facing rising sea levels, that you have collective action. I've just been in the Seychelles doing field research there, and it was very obvious that there is thought leadership about numbers, and that the cut of the international community that the Commonwealth offers, given that you've got Caribbean, small Indian Ocean island states and others, means that they're more powerful in their voice. And so there has been some progressive agendas that have been pursued through the Commonwealth and then put onto more broad international agendas at the UN and elsewhere, through initially the Commonwealth Laboratory.
All right. Alex used the term louder voice there. Sophie.
If I can jump in here.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, if I can jump in here, I think one of the downside of being a member of the Commonwealth, it's I mean, it's the drowning of individual voice. Like say for instance, Gambia, quite often, to some extent, they are forced to go along with the agenda, because there is some kind of a majority, always the consensus. So being outside as well gives you that advantage, like you say, to make your own demands, make your own bilateral relation as it suits you, not just being there and then pander to the needs of the larger group, the larger member. So I think if one of the downside is that you lost some kind of your individuality and identity.
All right. Well, Sophie, on that point, however loud the individual voice is or isn't in the Commonwealth, how effective is it in terms of policy? I mean, it doesn't have an army, as we know. It doesn't offer any trade privileges. It doesn't have any common defence or economic policies. It doesn't even have an executive authority.
No, I mean, it's an interesting organisation. It's very different from many of the other international organisations such as the UN, the EU, which have binding international treaties. That just doesn't exist within the Commonwealth. But it does have the capacity to change, because you don't want to be one of the members who is suspended or kicked out of this group, because as we've been talking about, there is prestige. If I can come really quickly back to the point we were making about kind of the voice within the Commonwealth, I think being a member of the Commonwealth makes you part of the group. It means that you can go in as part of the group and push for change, which is on one hand, that's a very good thing to have in the diplomatic community. On the other hand, many of these smaller states, these island states and these ex-colonial states, they are reliant on the larger states within the Commonwealth for aid. So the Gambia, for example, has just had a big gift of aid from the EU. Now, with that kind of relationship within the Commonwealth, there is still going to be that inequality. So whilst there is potential for these smaller countries with developing economies to have their voice, they still don't want to ostracize themselves from the larger countries like Canada, Australia, the UK, with whom they still have an unfair and unbalanced relationship.
All right, Alex, I understand you've been involved in some of the initiatives to do with elections and human rights and monitoring and so on with the Commonwealth. To jump on some of the terms Sophie was mentioning there, you don't want to be kicked out, you don't want to be ostracized. We've seen countries suspended after coups against democracies. Have the suspensions ever impacted the state of democracy or human rights in suspended countries?
I don't think that the suspensions have really made a big material difference internally I mean, take Zimbabwe that has walked away from the Commonwealth. There's no Commonwealth sanctions. I mean, what may have impacted are US sanctions, targeted measures, Canadian, Australian, EU ones, nothing to do with the Commonwealth, but it is the kind of moral authority. And it's interesting that every time I've been back to Harare over the last year and a half, the signalling from Zimbabwe is that Zimbabwe is considering at some point rejoining the Commonwealth. I tend to think that probably won't happen while Mr. Mugabe remains as president. But once he has moved on, I should think that we'll be in a Gambia-like situation. I think what is powerful, and I've been part of that, is the Commonwealth observer groups monitoring elections. For example, in December, I was part of the Commonwealth Observer Group in Ghana. The former South African president, Thabo Mbeki, was the chair of the group, and we had significant influence. We were small, but we had a monitoring group that reflected the diversity of the Commonwealth. So there were people on that group that were from Grenada, for example, from Trinidad, from Malaysia, as well as a number of African countries, UK, Canada, and Australia, and New Zealand. When the election results, when the elections had happened, the good offices, through the chair, played an influential role, I think, in the soft landing and the good result that we saw in Ghana. So I think the Commonwealth plays a really important role in that side of things. And then we haven't really talked about Commonwealth soft power. I mean, next year is the Commonwealth Games, for example, in Queensland, Australia. That is quite powerful too in terms of the competition that's taking place with athletes from around the world. And the Queen's baton at the moment is in Africa, travelling around the world, finally to be delivered in Queensland next year.
All right, so good at soft power, good at monitoring. Murtala, though, when it comes down to hard power and really taking action, at least in Africa, doesn't that usually come down to ECOWAS or the African Union?
Yes, and I think, you know, for the last 10 years or so, I think ECOWAS has really overshadowed you know, groups like the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth, I think it's mainly seen in the light of, in terms of providing probably education or some limited technical assistance. But when it comes to election monitoring, observation, and real leveraging power, I think it's ECOWAS. We've seen what they did in 2012 in Mali when there was a coup d'etat. They stepped in and then stopped the military from taking over. They didn't even spend a month there. We saw what they did in Guinea-Bissau, and then lately in the Gambia, my own country. I think what they've done has been very you know, tremendous. So I think increasingly they are showing that it's the body for West African countries to pull their weights together, and then if they're going to promote democracy, human rights, I think it's increasingly become very, very relevant in West Africa.
All right, I think we've got a couple of minutes.
Can I just add
okay,
one thing
go
on
ahead,
that,
Alex.
which is it's not zero sum. Yeah, it's not zero sum. So, for example,
that was going to be
Ghana,
my question.
There was really good coordination between the Commonwealth, ECOWAS, the regional body for West Africa, and the African Union, the continental body. And it was that synergy that was really, really effective. And so I think it depends on the country and it depends on the circumstance. The other thing that the Commonwealth can do in certain situations is provide very good mediation, good offices. Often that's not public, it's not heard for many years after it's happened, and it's usually in collaboration, in cooperation with the regional or continental body.
Okay,
too.
all right, let's
give zero sum.
30 seconds for Murtala to get back in on that point, Alex. Go ahead, Murtala.
Yes, no, I think, I mean, the past year, the Commonwealth has been piggybacking on, you know, what other countries are doing. And I think the biggest downside for a Commonwealth, I think the focus in terms of trade, because most of these smaller countries, they don't need aid, they need foreign direct investment. And when the UK is talking about, like the Brexit, when they're talking about establishing trade, they're talking more about establishing trade with Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and India, not these smaller countries in West Africa. And I think that's where Gambia should be looking at. It's not about just going back to the Commonwealth to seek aid, but how to attract foreign investment that can create jobs.
Okay, I think we've got about a minute left here, so I want to give it to Sophie and try and look forward a little bit. What about reform? The world is very different today from the world which existed when the Commonwealth was formed, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I think I want to come in on the point the other two participants were talking about. I think there's almost this idea that there's a kind of an absolute amount of influence within the world, and we have to therefore give, you know, X amount to one international group and X amount to another. And actually, just because the Commonwealth may increase its influence, that doesn't mean that the EU or the UN or ECOWAS is going to have any less influence. They can work, as we've said, alongside each other. And I think that ECOWAS has been such a big, prominent push for economic and diplomatic change and reform in West Africa. And the Commonwealth should be and can be part of that.
All right, I'm afraid we are getting close to the end of time now, so plenty more subjects that we could discuss when it comes to the Commonwealth. We'll have to save it, though, for another show. For now, though, let's thank our guests for this discussion: Alex Vines, Sophie Gallop and Murtala Touray. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Well, you can also catch the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here for now, thanks for joining us.